Hi, my name is Thomas Grummt. I've been an animator at Dreamworks for over 10 years, and I've also worked as a supervising animator. I'm excited to take a look at a shot from the AnimChallenge for the month of April. The winner for the Naruto challenge is Dane Romley, but there's been a slight change in plans, and he has generously agreed to gift his critique to the second place winner, Watcharatep Dokmai. More details about Dane's prize will be announced soon, but without further ado, let's get into the review. That's so cool. So much fun to watch. Hey Watcharatep, welcome to your review for the animation challenge for Naruto. So let me just start off by saying that it's crazy to watch. There's so much going on. It's really cool action. I'm not doing any martial arts myself, so it's extra fun for me to watch all these cool moves and stuff. And I think you've done a great job with this piece. So I think most of my review will just be, very positive. And I'm going to point out all the cool things that you did. And I'll have a few things I'll mention that could maybe be improved, or maybe some suggestions about mostly clarity and how things read, and how as an audience, if I think it's easy to understand and easy to follow. So I think that will be probably my biggest critique, if you will. But overall, this is really cool, and I think it has great energy. It has really fun mechanics. It has, it's very quick, so it's just very entertaining to watch. And I also really like all the little nuances and the 2D effects that you added, like the smears and the little particles that fly off when somebody gets hit. So yeah, I think let's watch it a few times. Let's go through and point out a few things. But yeah, I won't have a lot of negative things to say, I think. Hopefully it's still going to be helpful for you, and maybe you can take some things away from this. So one thing I was curious about is if you had the audio before, if you animated to an existing audio, or if you kind of made the audio fit the animation that you did, because there are so many sound effects in there, and that are timed, that it seems like it would be very hard to find something that is so specific that you can then animate to. So kudos to you. I assume that you've done some like editing and some sound effects for this, which is really fun, even the flying knives and all that. And I also really like the stuff that you did with the headband, like all the overlap you did there, which is very 2D, like all these shapes that are really cool. I really appreciate that, because in a lot of work like this, that's maybe for a challenge or student shots, and I'm not exactly sure what level of animator you are and how long you've maybe been working professionally, but oftentimes those things get overlooked a little bit, and I really appreciate all the fluidity that you added, with all the shapes. And the shot does feel pretty 2D, and I know you've used a sort of a cartoon shader, like a flat shading, but even in the animation, I can see that you understand how 2D works, and you really paid attention to the spacing, and you have some bendy limbs in there. That it's pretty graphic overall. So yeah, and I really think this is cool when it comes closer to camera, that we can really see these fluid shapes, and when he's moving in this direction, that really adds to the elegance. And I also like that you have a lot of, I think the camera is good. I'll get in a second to staging and clarity, but I really like that you play with depth, and you have a lot of elements coming really close to us, like like that, and things fly in our face a little bit, which makes the shot very dynamic and dramatic. And I think that is pretty cool. Like these knives here, they get really close to camera, and you have this strong perspective. That's pretty cool. All right. So, and also especially those fluid shapes really help because there's no motion blur. I don't know if you're planning to add motion blur to this. I assume you don't, to get that really 2D sensibility, which I think is really cool. But then you kind of have to make up for the missing motion blur by some smear frames and really these, really dragging these shapes and doing proper overlap so that it doesn't feel too, that it still feels fluid. So that's great. So I'm by no means an expert in the anime Naruto, and I don't know that much about the story, but I think this is, I think his name is Pain, the bad guy, or one of the bad guys. So at first I was going to mention that here, that like appeal wise, that there are some things that I would probably change appeal wise, but then I looked up what he actually looks like, so that he just has these eyes and these things through his nose and stuff. So that's all good. I'm not going to comment on that because it's appropriate for the subject matter. So okay, I'm going to point out some cool things later on, but let's first get to probably my biggest and only note, which is readability and clarity. So to my eyes, a lot of the action happens very fast, especially when he kicks or hits somebody. It's so fast that I miss some of the cool stuff. Because, for example, when he runs in first, and I know this, I like that you did this very specific like ninja run here. That works really well with the arms back. And I even saw, I didn't know this, but there are even some videos of people doing this in real life, which is kind of fun, trying to run like this. So that's all good. But see here, you have the audience has almost no preparation for what's about to happen. So this other character comes on screen and gets hit right away. So, and because the camera is moving as well, it's very hard to understand. And it's cool that it's fast and it's very very actiony, but you have like 2 frames of the guy in his pose, and then he gets hit. And here too, you have this move and he flies off screen so fast that it's a bit hard to follow. When I scrub through, I understand everything, but if I play it at speed, oh boy, it's so fast, and it gets so close in and out of frame, or so fast, that I feel like the audience is going to miss some of that really cool movement. So I'm a little bit unsure how to solve this, but I would say if you can somehow squeeze a few more frames of the guy coming in and then getting hit, like the camera pans over with the attacker, and then we have a little bit more time to prepare for what's about to happen. So we see, oh, there's a guy coming, boom, he gets hit. So sometimes a few frames can make a big difference there. And I know you have to find a balance between feeling really powerful, but still being readable. So I think that's not an easy thing to do, but I definitely, looking at this shot overall, same thing here, where he does this move and I only have a few frames to get prepared because the camera just pans over, the guy comes on screen and then gets hit right away. And then also here, he gets covered. So I think this is all really cool, the way he gets hit and the way you go from this bent leg to this really strong to this straight, this is all really cool. Like this is a very strong, it's like an arrow almost that sells the force. But staging wise and timing wise, it is so fast that I kind of miss it a little bit. And then here, I wonder if you can find a better solution for this where he doesn't get covered up. So maybe, maybe his arm comes up over here so that we can still see this guy falling. Because if I played at speed, he started to get covered here, and the hair has the same color as the other guy. And here he's covered, we see a little bit of him. Here he's covered, and then the impact is pretty cool. I think the way he tumbles and falls is fine. But just if you can clear up a few of those things, I think it's really going to help the readability overall. And I also think that this guy could probably use a frame or two more, or maybe 3 more hang time before he falls. It's almost like the arc is a little bit too linear, where he goes, it feels a little bit too fast, and I wish we had a little bit more stylized motion, where he gets kicked and he goes, boink. You have some hang time at the top of the arc, which might help see him a little bit longer, and then it doesn't feel like he gets sucked down to the ground. And the same thing happens here as well. Here, this guy, and I think this is much easier to understand because we can see him for much longer approaching. He's throwing the knives and all that. That's really cool, and I can actually see him before he gets kicked. So this is a really fun move, by the way. I love that. And you have the smear frames. One thing you can consider, because he's black on a dark blue background, we're missing some of those shapes. So I know it's set in nighttime, but I wonder if there's a way to maybe clarify that. Maybe you can even use some gray and maybe like give these guys a bit of an outline somehow, so that we don't miss these cool shapes. But because you almost don't see it. So I wish that maybe they had some, they would stand out a little bit more from the background. But, I was pointing out all these cool little sparks or sweat or whatever that is. That's super fun. So what I was mentioning here is that the arc feels too fast. Not the arc itself, but the spacing on the arc. So if you track his center of gravity along the arc, you're going to find that it is moving too fast on the top. It's here, it goes there, and then it's here. So it feels like he's flying through the arc. If I draw it in a different place, he gets hit, and then you have some kind of spacing like that, and then he accelerates. But it would feel cooler if at the top of the arc, you would ease in and ease out a little bit more. So you have tush, vroom. You have an acceleration when he gets hit, a slowdown, and then when he falls again, gravity takes over. So I think, because otherwise they feel a little bit like they're being pulled. Cool. But the shapes that you have along the arc are really elegant and cool. I think those work. But it just feels too fast. Cool. Let's see. There's a little something here that you might be able to improve, where staging wise he's over here, and then when we cut, his face jumps over to the screen right. If you draw a half line, I don't know if this is exactly half, but I think if you cut from this to that, he should probably be slightly on the left of screen. Or you could pan maybe at the end of this shot. If you want to keep him to the right, because he's been to the right most of the time. If you want to keep him at the right of frame, you can maybe pan with him a little bit more. It's not a big deal, but usually you try when you cut, you try to make it easy on the audience's eyes so that the eye doesn't have to jump around so much. So when you have something in frame over here and then you cut and it is somewhere, the focus is over here, the audience has to sort of follow around, and you want to make it as smooth as possible. So I'd keep it over the cut, I'd keep it in the same area of screen, and it feels nicer. It's working well in this cut, I think, because you're looking here and then you kind of look at the same spot, where he comes down. So that is cool. Let's see. So yeah, I think, and to finish my point, that I feel a little bit of the same thing here, where I don't have any time to prepare for this really cool move. He does this like explosion where all these guys get thrown away, and it's really powerful, but I only have a few frames to even understand what is happening and why he's doing that. So I don't know if it makes sense to maybe add a shot before that's more of maybe a wider shot where I can see the guys approaching, and then you cut to this and they get closer and get blasted. Or maybe you add a point of view from him that maybe he sees them. But I think there needs to be something to set up this action, because I only have, I see that he's preparing for something, but I don't know what it is. And then the guys come in for 1, 2, 3, get blasted, 1, 2, 3, 4. After 5 frames, they're already out of screen again. So it's very hard to understand what is happening. And maybe people who are watching anime all the time, they're used to this timing, but I think it's usually it's a little bit clearer. Because if you make a cool action like this, you want it to really land and be really impressive and be clear as well. So I think this is my biggest note throughout the whole shot, is that you're doing such cool stuff, but it is so quick with the camera pans and the time we have to see what's about to happen. It's kind of like an anticipation, where you're like, oh, poof, and the way that it's timed, it's more like you're following the main guy, and then something happens, and then, oh, what was that? It feels a little bit like that to me. Cool. All right. Small note about the background. I think I like the simplicity you have in the characters. I think the texture, the rock ground texture, feels like it's not quite fitting. I like that it helps with the perspective and the camera moves and understand like where they are on the ground. But it just looks a little bit too much like a game, like a cheap game texture to me. So maybe you can find something nicer, and maybe make the rocks in the background a little bit different than the floor. Just so the whole thing has a little bit more of a consistent design to it. I think that'd be really nice. All right, let's get a little bit more into detail here. So I think here, there's one thing you could try, where this foot, it'd be nice to see for a few frames longer. So because it disappears pretty fast, I see it for 1, 2, 3, 4 frames, and it kind of pops down. So if there's a way, maybe even to keep it in place a little bit longer, where it stays higher, so you get more of that feeling that he really goes boom, and instead of like punching and pulling back right away, I think having that hold for a little bit, you feel that impact better, and it really feels like a punch. But I know you have to get it back to the ground for this next move, so it's probably tricky. All right. Yeah, we talked about the guys in the end. I think if you can find a way to maybe even squeeze a few frames out of the actual impact, where maybe they fly in and then there are maybe 2 more frames or so where they kind of get stuck on that energy ball and then get blown away. So it's not like dum dum, it's not so fast in and out. It feels powerful, but yeah, it's pretty hard to understand. But maybe that's just me being old and slow. I don't know. All right. So let me just point out some cool stuff that you did. I really like for this ninja run the subtle overlap you have on this hand. Like, it's just enough that it feels stylized, but it doesn't feel stiff. So I think that's really cool. And I like that you keep the head, the head's pretty much locked like a predator animal. It's like super focused and there's no overlap in the head, so he can really see what he's about to do. That's really cool. And I like all this stuff, the twisting you have. Let me use a different color. The twisting you have in the limbs is really cool. Like, those poses are super fun. And the line of action is really strong. So that stuff is really awesome. And then I like that you have these explosive shape changes from the bent leg. That's like a squash position. And then you go boom in one frame. You go into this, you go into this like arrow shape. That is great. That's really powerful. Boom. And then you hold it. I think here you hold it enough. I think 2 frames probably enough. And then you have the energy coming out the other side. That's awesome. And here it's nice because you can actually see the hand-drawn effects if they're white on a darker background. And I like that the hand-drawn effects are black for the black character. That makes sense. But maybe you can like improve the readability a little bit more. Let's see what else we have. I like all the details you have with the knives, how they fall. That also feels too fast though. Yeah, the knife has a little bit of the same issue where it feels like it's in fast forward. It goes instead of poof. It feels it doesn't feel believable enough. And if you hold those for a little bit longer, you're also going to see it better, I think. And the physicality will be more believable. In general, in the shot, I had the impression that you could probably push the faces. I don't know these rigs, and I don't know how far they go. But I think for something like here, where he turns around and sees the next danger, I wish there was a little bit more contrast in the face, where maybe he kicks and then maybe you have an opening in the face where he sees something and you can feel some contrast. The faces overall feel pretty stiff, and maybe that's a rig limitation, but I feel like he keeps the same expression pretty much. And even when this guy gets kicked, you could open the mouth more and really maybe squeeze the eyes closed to get more contrast out of this stuff. Or here, like, maybe this could be a little bit more extreme facial expression, because it's going so fast anyways that you could push that stuff more. And here, I wish that he had more of a aware, like a surprised, I need to do something expression, and then he gets back into his focus. If you can like distort and squash and stretch these faces a bit more, so that you really feel the you know, he could be like, his jaw could be sideways, and he could be sort of just more extreme, so that you feel the impact in their faces as well. And you'll see it because you don't have motion blur on this stuff. So I think it's worth pushing the faces if the rig allows it. Cool. Or even here, you know, even this expression, if I look at the mouth, it's pretty neutral, and the eyebrows. And there's not really a change in this shot. Right? He kind of stays like, I'm almost wondering why you're cutting to this close-up if there's not something happening in his face. I mean, yes, he's looking side to side, but there's not really any emotional, and maybe that's his character. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Maybe this guy is just stone-faced, you know, and he doesn't ever let people know what he's feeling. If that's the case, fine. But if you're cutting to a close-up, I kind of want to see something going on in that face. So one thing I'd be careful with is, where was that? This is all great. I think in something like this, the arms almost become a little bit too soft, where they almost feel like they're losing their structure, their bone structure. So I think it's working, but this is sort of borderline for me, where the joints, where I almost feel like it becomes rubber hose animation a little bit. And it doesn't really stand out too much in this case because it's on a dark background. But make sure these shapes don't get too round. You know, I think this is fine with the leg, where you still feel the bones, but the arm, you know, if I look at the outline, it's almost a noodle. And if you have that for one frame or so, that is okay. But you know, here you have it back. I think this is fine. This is almost too angular now, maybe, but this is great. Oh, wrong color. I think this, come on, this here is probably about as much as I would round the arms to still feel like they have a structure in there. Let's see what else I can say. Yeah, you know, this stuff I love. Like those smear effects, that is super cool. And I also like how you're blending it out. You know, that the effect doesn't just go away because he's losing the knife, but the knife still has some motion energy. Let me play this for a sec. Yeah, I think the timing of that knife is okay. Yeah, this stuff is awesome. The little spit bubbles that fly away. That's cool. Again, great job with the headband overlap. Usually I give a lot of notes on overlap, but you seem to have a really good handle on this. That is cool. On a shot like this, I'd probably really stretch these guys out and make them almost straight. You know, but you're pretty much doing it. Yeah, and then they pop down. Nice. Yeah, that's good. No notes on the headband overlap. I think here, for example, when he's looking side to side, I miss that because there's no head motion in there. If he really comes up and he looks side to side, I think you need to take the head with it. And because if you go up and he just goes like that and there's no head motion, you won't see it in motion because it's such a fast action. So I would say here, keep his head a little bit more angled to the other side. Like that. maybe, so we can actually see that he's looking over there. And then when he looks over here, you know, you go into what you have, which is that. So then you'll feel the looking around a little bit more. I would say, and again, you might have taken this from the actual show, and that's how he does it. But I wonder if you can find better poses for these hands. And then here, for that pose, I would probably keep the hands away from the face, unless it has to be exactly like this. But I would say you could probably lower the hands and get them in front of his dark shirt, and make these arms a little bit straighter, more like that maybe, just so. And if you can possibly get a little bit of black between his face and his hands, it's going to read better. You know, I can probably do it with my hands. Instead of this, you know, you go like that, where there's more contrast, and it's because he's so far away, it's going to clarify the pose a little bit, I think. Because this gets pretty muddy in terms of shapes. You did a really nice job. You did a really nice job with not the background characters, the opponents. They are really well executed as well. I love all these knives and the trails that they have. Oh, he's even got some magic going over here. Yeah, like I said, these are all these are all pretty small suggestions. You know, I'm almost trying to like find stuff that I can say, because it's a really great piece, and you have a really good handle on the mechanics. You know, like all the way he does these moves, I don't really have any suggestions because they feel good to me, and I'm not an expert in like martial arts stuff. So yeah, I think that is why I'm mostly focused on the clarity, the staging, and the quote unquote acting, you know, with the faces, where you can just push the not so much the emotion, but just you can add emphasis to what's already happening by just reflecting that in the faces as well. They just you know, you have a little bit here where he just gets a little freaky and opens his eyes before he does that big move. But I think that's pretty much what I wanted to mention. Let's play it a few more times. You could probably also, let's see. No, that feels good. I was going to say you might be able to maybe give that landing a little bit more time and wait, but it does feel pretty powerful. Yeah. No, I like that he comes up and recovers quickly, because it shows that he's really good at what he does, and he's strong and all that. All right, so I think those are pretty much, wait, I just remembered one thing. I think you could probably smooth out there's something in this elbow here, and how the spacing goes, where there's a little bit of a pop somewhere in there. I think maybe there. And then it gets stuck for a few frames here, and then pops up again. You know, this is like tiny polish stuff. Because it's such a prominent shape right in front of our face, you could probably look at that, but it's not a big deal. So summing this up, I would say, you know, you did a great job, and congrats on getting second place in this challenge. And you know, you definitely deserve it. It's a really cool action piece. You know, it's fun to watch. It has a lot of energy. It's entertaining. You know, it's cool. It feels powerful. So I think all of that stuff that you want with ninja fighting that you have in there. And like we talked about, my only big suggestion would be, especially for the next shot you do in this kind of style, is to make sure that the audience has a few frames or a few split second to prepare, to understand what is kind of about to happen. You know, you need a little bit of preparation for either a joke or an action or any kind of beat to really land. And I think that is the one thing that is not fully working for me, because the really cool moves that you're doing, they need a tiny bit more setup, in my opinion, my humble opinion. And then, you know, the audience could enjoy it all that much more when it actually happens. And sometimes this won't take another like 12 frames of the guy coming in, but maybe 3, 4, and then you can almost imagine it as like, and maybe also for the hits themselves, to almost slow down time a little bit, where it goes fast and then poof, and then you have a little bit of hang time, and then boom, it keeps going really fast. Because right now it's just very frantic, the whole piece. You know, it has good energy, but it also goes from one thing to the next, and it's a bit hard to follow. So I hope this is in any way helpful. And again, congratulations on your really cool animation and getting second place. And I hope to see more animation from you in the future. Okay? All right. Have a good one.